Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Inside Elections. Today is Sunday, January 25th, 2026, and today we're going to talk about this news coming out of the state of Utah that they are failing to re-gerrymander the state of Utah. Now, before we get into this actual news, I have to give you a little bit of background information on this case, what is exactly happening, so you understand what is happening in this actual news. And this starts all the way back, this dates back all the way to 2016. Yes, when Donald Trump was first elected. Utah had this congressional map. It was a 4-0 delegation. Democrats had no representation, and Republicans drew it that way. They drew it so that Democrats would not have representation in the state because they had a supermajority in the state of Utah. However, in 2016, there was one district, Utah's 4th, that was slightly more favorable to the Democrats than the other districts. The other districts were R plus 40, R plus 47, R plus 28. This district was only R plus 12.5. And now, yes, normally that should be completely out of reach for Democrats. Democrats should have no chance at winning an R plus 13 district. They just shouldn't. However, 2016, what's familiar about that year? Like I said, Donald Trump was elected. And you know what happens after 2016? Donald Trump's midterms. 2018, you know what happened in the Donald Trump's midterms? A blue wave. So in 2018, they took this R plus 13 district and they flipped it blue. Democrats flipped it blue. They gained representation in the state of Utah. Narrowly, yes, by 0.2%. But they flipped this district from Republican to Democrat. And all the other districts were still safe, of course, because they were drawn to be incredibly favorable for the Republican Party. But this one district flipped to the Democrats. And Republicans were not having that. Now, yes, in 2020, it flipped back to the Republicans, narrowly only by 1 point, but it flipped back to the Republican Party in 2020. But you know what happened in 2020? The census. All the states got to redraw their congressional maps. And Republicans said, okay, in 2018, Democrats won this seat. We cannot let this happen ever again. We have a supermajority in the legislature. We should not give Democrats any chance to have any representation in the state of Utah. So that's what they did. The Republicans took their supermajority in the state legislature of Utah and they redrew the Utah map to be implemented in 2022, the first time these new maps were used. And they drew it to be incredibly favorable for the Republican Party. Utah's 3rd, they drew it to be R plus 35. Utah's 4th, which was the district that flipped to the Democrats in 2018, they drew it to be R plus 29. The other districts, R plus 26 and R plus 34. This map was as solid for the Republican Party as you could get. The Democrats had no chance at even coming within 10, 15, 20 points of getting close to winning any seat in the state of Utah. And it worked. It worked in 2020. They got by with it, and it worked in 2024. They got by with it. They had 4 safe R districts in the state of Utah. However, actually, before we get into that, this map is so gerrymandered. You see this where the districts combine. Let me show you a different map. This is that the purple is Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is the biggest. By far the biggest metropolitan area in the state of Utah. They vote for Democrats, which is why Republicans drew this map so that it split Salt Lake City between these 4 districts almost evenly to give Democrats in Salt Lake City to negate the representation. So that, say, like these small tiny parts of each of these districts has a slice of Salt Lake City gets put out all throughout southeast Utah. I mean, look, they gerrymandered it so that the votes in Salt Lake City were so diluted by like southwest Utah with R plus 90 districts, so that Democrats would have no representation in the state of Utah. And it worked. Like I said, it worked in 2020 and 2022 and 2024. But in 2025, a judge ruled that this map is illegal. It must be redrawn. This is undemocratic. And it is because in 2018, Utah passed this. They passed Proposition 4 in the state of Utah. Narrowly, but they passed it by about 6,000 votes. They passed it, 7,000 votes. And it implemented a Utah Independent Redistricting Commission and Standards Act. That's the act that they passed. It made it so that Utah must draw fair congressional maps that gives representation to those who don't have representation, aka Democrats in Salt Lake City who didn't have representation because their votes were diluted with the R+90 areas of the state of Utah. And because of this, when Republicans redrew the maps in 2020, they were illegal because it didn't uphold this proposition. It didn't uphold fair congressional map drawing. So this judge ruled that, okay, this is illegal. We're implementing new maps. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, Republicans. I'm going to let you draw a map that you want and give it to me to implement ahead of the 2026 midterms if it is a legal map. So this Republican state legislator went and drew these 5 maps. Option A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, D, and E, I mean. These maps they drew these maps because they had the benefit of the doubt. They drew them. They were allowed to draw them initially as they wanted, as long as they were legal. However, these maps were not legal. They drew up these 5 maps, and then they went to pass option C, this one. Let me give you a closer look at this. This was option C. And what you might notice is these are all 4 Republican districts. They all voted for Donald Trump in 2026. So they went to the judge with this map and said, okay, we've passed a map. Let's implement this map ahead of the 2026 midterms. And the judge went, hold up. No. This map is also illegal. It gives you 4 Republican seats. You've had your chance. The judge said you've had your chance, and it's time for actual fair maps. So the judge went to the plaintiffs in this case. They went to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party said, "Okay, sure thing. We'll draw a district for you since Republicans wanted to do it." And they drew this district that was R+24, Harris +24. And the judge went, "Okay, this map is legal. Republicans, I gave you a shot. So we're gonna go to the Democrats," and that's what happened. They implemented this map ahead of the 2026 midterms as a safe Democratic seat. Republicans have no shot at winning the seat whatsoever. And that's where we are today. However, Republicans don't like this. They don't like giving Democrats representation in the state of Utah. They like their 4-0 map. So what they are trying to do, is repeal Proposition 4, the proposition that makes the current map, or the map in 2024, that made it illegal. They're trying to repeal it. However, to repeal it, they need to gather signatures. They need to gather 140,000 signatures by February 14th for this ballot measure to pass, and so they can bring it to the voters in Utah to decide if they want to repeal the independent commission that draws fair maps, that forces fair maps. But to do this, like I said, they need 140,000 signatures. And as of January 23rd, yes, this was 2 days ago, the last time this was updated, but as of January 23rd, they only had 40% of signatures. At this point, they had 56,000 signatures. At this point, they needed to keep on track so that they would have enough by February 14th. They would need 85,000. They're behind by about 20,000 signatures. They only have 22 days left to make up this difference. They need to hit roughly 2,800 every single day. However, their recent pace, they've been getting about 1,300 every single day. At this pace, unless something dramatically changes in the state of Utah, they're not going to hit this margin. They need to up the game very, very, very much. And that's not it. To pass this, they also need to hit a signature goal in 26 of the 29 congressional districts. It's not congressional districts, state senate districts in the state of Utah. In some of these districts, I mean, District 6 only have 17% of the gold. District 7 they only have 17% of the gold. Uh District 14 they only have 15% of the gold. They need 100% in 26 of these 29 districts to for this ballot measure to go to the voters. And once again, they need to have it by February 14th. And 4 districts added less than 15 signatures in one day. Less than 15 signatures. At this pace, like I said, unless something dramatically changes in the state of Utah, this is not going to happen. They are not going to even pass this measure to bring it to the voters to see if they actually want to repeal the proposition that they voted on just 8 years prior, 7 years, 8 years prior to, I can't believe 26 years, 8 years ago, but they voted on this 8 years ago to decide that they wanted fair maps. So even if this did pass somehow, they would need to pass it statewide. They would need to convince voters to say, hey, you don't actually want fair maps, right? You want 4-0 maps, right? And yeah, that's about where we are today. I'll probably make another video on this on February 14th to see if it actually happened, if they pass it somehow. I don't think they will, but if they do pass it, I'll make a video about this soon. I encourage you to like this video, to subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video. I upload election news every single day. And yeah, I hope you have a great day.